Hello, beautiful divine souls. Welcome back to Goddess of Rebirth, the podcast where we dive deep into the heart of what makes us human, exploring pathways to healing, connection, and personal growth. I'm Monica, your guide on this journey of discovery and transformation. Today, I'm incredibly honored to have a very special guest joining me, Megan Sherer, a remarkable holistic therapist, somatic healer, life coach, and a renowned expert in love, alignment, and relationships. Megan, it is my pleasure to have you here with me today. How are you?
I'm so good. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much, Monica. I'm excited to chat.
I'm so excited. In today's episode, we're embarking on a profound exploration into the realms of relationship and communication. We're going to dive deep into the complex feelings of unworthiness that many of us struggle with. We're going to discuss about breaking the cycle, what is holding us back, and we're also going to shine a light on the path to healing trauma. We're going to be talking about ancestral healing and generational trauma, which is something that I'm very passionate about. And before I tell you more and I get really excited, Megan, would you like to share a little bit of your story? How is that you end up where you are? And yeah, just share a little bit about your journey.
Absolutely. I love that you're excited about all those topics because I could talk about them all day long. So I feel like there's definitely a lot for us to get into. And even when it comes to my story, I was thinking the other day, kind of doing some writing and reflection on what's happened over the last 5 years of my life in particular. I feel like I've lived maybe 10 lives in just 5 years. And when I think about my journey overall, that really started closer to 15 years ago. When I think about my own personal healing journey and what led me into this work, it's hard to even know where to start. But some of the kind of highlights, I really started my journey to the work that I'm doing now with my own personal healing, as I think most of us do. I got into the realm of yoga and health and wellness at a very young age and just was fascinated by the way the body worked and spent several years in that space. I started my career supporting women in eating disorder recovery and having a better relationship with their bodies. And pretty soon into that journey, I faced a very sort of dark night of the soul of my own. I went through a lot of back-to-back trauma and was in my early 20s at the time and just sort of uncovering and navigating the impacts of childhood trauma that I had lived through, but never really identified or explored before. And was at this place where I was like, okay, the things that I've relied on in the past to keep me sane, like doing yoga and working out and taking care of my body, they're not working anymore. So there's got to be something more. What else is there? And that's really what began my spiritual journey out of kind of a place of necessity, like going deeper into healing and not just on a physical level, but mental, emotional, and spiritual, because I couldn't really see another option. Like I was in so much pain, I needed something. And fortunately, I had wonderful teachers and guides and mentors in my life that showed up at the perfect time along the way. And it's been this really beautiful sort of evolution ever since. And for me, I started seeing in my own life and then in the lives of a lot of the clients I was working with that at the root of so many of our pains and problems and patterns was attachment wounds. Like really what it all came down to was love or the lack of love or wanting to be loved, but feeling like we're unworthy or unlovable. And just these kind of wounds around our heart that certainly I didn't know what to do with or how to navigate. No one ever taught me that. And I could see that was the case for most of the people I was interacting with. So I started to just get really fascinated with what does it mean to get into alignment with what's true for our heart and the way that we want to love, and to be able to really excavate and navigate some of those old wounds in a way where we can actually just heal them, not just talk about them, but like, how can we actually get out of the pattern and do something different than what was modeled to us or passed down to us, mentioning generational trauma. I just started to get really fascinated about all things matters of the heart, applying it to myself first and then my clients as well. And there's been lots of kind of mini journeys and chapters along the way that I could speak to, but that was the overall journey that got me here.
This episode is going to be fascinating. If you're not right now, if you're not feeling it, you stay with us, because this is going to be, it's going to be a journey. So let's start this conversation, Megan, with let's talk about the need that so many of us have to feel chosen. And why is that so many people have this need to feel validated? And how is that impacting our sense of self-worth and relationships?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of speaking to that need to be chosen first, that sort of validation that we crave of wanting to know that we are seen and known and special and loved by someone, that really goes back to this sort of biological need that we have to be seen and known and loved by our parents or primary caregivers when we're babies, when we're just born and coming into this world. We don't have the capacity to grow and thrive and figure it out all on our own. We do need people as human beings. We are inherently social creatures. And I think that especially in Western cultures, there's like this overemphasis on hyper independence and like building like a sense of identity that is separate from other people. And I think there's a lot of value in having your own kind of whole, complete sense of self and a self identity. As somebody who used to really fall into codependent behaviors, it was really valuable for me to figure out who am I separate from other people around me and what they want and what they need. And, who am I? What do I value? What do I want? But when we're little, we're still kind of coming into our sense of self, into our self identity. And we do need that co-regulation, that connection of the people who are there to support and care for us and raise us, which is our parents or our caregivers. And when there are any sort of ruptures there or wounds in those particular bonds, in those particular attachments with your mother and your father, or the people who are responsible for raising you, it can create this sense of I'm not good enough. Like I must have done something wrong, or I have to, maybe I'm too much. Like maybe they couldn't handle my needs. Like when I cry, it would stress them out. And as baby, we don't have the language for that, but our nervous system, we can sense that. So we start to create these stories of too much or I'm not enough. I have to contort myself in order to get the love and support and care that I need. And when we grow up adults, those sort of imprinted patterns and stories, they don't go away unless we become cognizant of them, making the unconscious conscious. And so we go out into the world trying to heal or resolve that original wound of I didn't feel seen or known or loved by my parents, by my family. And I think that if I go find somebody else out there in the world who kind of reminds me of a family member or a parent on an unconscious level, and if I get them to choose me, then I will finally feel enough. Then it will heal that original core wound. And so I like to be so clear that there's nothing wrong with wanting to be chosen. There's nothing wrong with being chosen. If you're going to be in a friendship, in a healthy romantic partnership, in any sort of interdependent relationship, you want that reciprocity. You want it to be mutual. You want somebody who's like, yes, I'm in this with you. I am interested in building a life with you. I'm interested in getting to know who you are and how you feel and what's challenging for you. And I'm interested in helping you get your needs met. That's important to a relationship. But where the breakdown happens is when we have that core wound of I don't feel worthy of being chosen. I don't feel lovable. Then I might self-sabotage the people who do show up in my life to love me and to choose me. I might always choose people who are emotionally unavailable and who are not capable of choosing me in the way that I need to because I'm still playing out that old pattern. And that's when we get into this pattern of self-abandonment, of I don't care what it takes. I'm going to do anything I can to get you to choose me, even if that means betraying myself and my core values and what I need in order to stay in alignment and be healthy. And I've seen, I found myself there for many years, and I've seen so many people and women in particular find themselves in that place. And it's It's so devastating to feel like all I crave and want so badly is love, but I feel so inherently unlovable. I can't even honor and respect and love myself because my only priority is finding somebody to choose me. So that wound can run pretty deep.
That is deep. It is deep. And it's hard, I think, to when you are in that situation, in that position where you really need it. Like you express it so beautiful because it's something you didn't receive in childhood. So you could be a grown up and still do not realize that you are needing that
Yeah.
and craving it deeply, and taking also the time to sit down with ourselves and notice where we are, right? Because something
Mm-hmm.
that I heard you saying before was, I don't need somebody else to choose me so that I can feel worthy of love, worthy of attention, of care. I need
Mm-hmm.
to feel that first here, and then I can receive it.
It's not like we're not capable of receiving it if we don't love ourselves first. It's more like I am not just desperately trying to get someone to choose me for the sake of being chosen. I'm respecting myself enough to only participate in relationships where there is reciprocity and where there is a sense of healthy choice. Like, yes, I'm choosing to be in this relationship with you, not because I need you to fulfill, the healing of those old core wounds, but because I'm making an empowered choice, and it's two people making that empowered choice in that interdependent dynamic. And that does come from a place of self-respect, because all the times where I was like desperately wanting a guy who was clearly unavailable to choose me, and I kept pursuing somebody who told me, like, oh, I don't want anything serious right now. I'm not interested in a relationship. I don't want the same things as you. And I would show up again and again and again to get people like that to choose me. I didn't have self-respect at that time. I didn't have any connection to my sense of worthiness and my identity and who I was and what mattered to me. And so I stayed in that dynamic probably a lot longer than was healthy.
There's so many people in that situation right now, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm confident that this conversation is going to reach the right people who need to listen to these words right at this moment. Megan, what are your thoughts about why do we often find ourselves attracted to individuals who, like you were saying, don't reciprocate our feelings?
Mm-hmm.
How can we break this cycle and start choosing people who choose us back?
So, the simplest explanation for it is that it's familiar. It's familiar on a subconscious level. So, the people that we choose, the patterns that we participate in, we're choosing them because they are familiar to our subconscious mind. And our brains love what's familiar. They will always gravitate towards what is known and predictable because that feels safe, even if what is known and predictable is like miserable, even if like the thing that's familiar to me is people treating me badly and disrespecting me and not loving me in the way that I want to be loved. If that is, it's somehow familiar to my brain and nervous system and body, my brain will go, okay, great. That validates what I know from my past to be true. That feels safe. That keeps me in the box of my known reality. The unknown is really scary to the human mind. And it takes a lot of conditioning ourselves to be comfortable with the unknown, to be able to change a pattern. So that first step is acknowledging, how is this person or this pattern familiar to me in some way? And we can go into subconscious healing. We can go into the body and explore somatically, like with inner child work. We can go into the actual story of our past and kind of map out like, oh, okay, all of the partners I choose are emotionally unavailable, just like my dad was, or just like my mom was. And sometimes we can map very specifically. I keep choosing people who act the same way as this person in my family. A lot of the times, though, I find this really interesting. People will come to me and they'll be like, well, I don't have like a type or a pattern. Like all of the people that I've ended up with have been a little bit different. And when that's true, sometimes we sort of rotate between what's familiar. So one person that we date is reflective of our relationship with our mother. The next person is relationship with our father. The next person is maybe reflective of a relationship we had with a sibling. Maybe I had a sibling who was sort of like the rebel of the family really struggled. Maybe they struggled with addiction, and I always felt like I needed to save them, step in and save them. And so then I find myself dating somebody like that in adulthood to try to save this person in the way that I couldn't save my sibling. So sometimes we rotate through those familiar patterns of the people who were impactful for us in our childhood sort of formative years, but we've got to get clear on that first. Like, okay, what patterns now are representative of people and feelings from my past? Did I feel like I wasn't seen by the people in my family? How is that showing up now? Then that's when we can go into the actual healing and repairing of those particular wounds, because like you kind of alluded to earlier, there's these unmet needs. If I needed to feel loved and supported and seen and safe and chosen as a child, which all children do, and I didn't get that, that's that sort of core unmet need that I'm always going to be seeking for and searching for in some way in my adult relationships that might get me into some of these unhealthy patterns.
I want to ask you a question. You were mentioning somatic work before, and there might be people that probably will listen to this conversation that they probably don't understand the concept of somatic work that well. Can you explain us a little bit what that means and why the work that we do with our body is so important in this conversation about healing and about trauma?
Yeah, absolutely. So somatic, the word soma and somatic work refers to working with the body. So working with the sensations and physical experience of your physical body. And why that's so important, because I think a lot of people just relate to their body in a way that's like, I work out and I try to stay fit and, I eat well to take care of my body. There's actually so many deeper layers that our body is responsible for, because our body is essentially the representation or expression of our subconscious mind. So I like to think of it like an iceberg. I'm an analogy kind of person, and visuals kind of help me. The top of the iceberg, that little bit that's sticking above the water, about 10%, that's our conscious mind. So that's the thoughts that you are sort of attuned to on a regular basis, the way that you speak to yourself. That's when you show up to talk therapy and you talk about the way that you're feeling and what you think about your life. And you talk about, oh yeah, this happened in my childhood and this and that. And I'm having this relationship problem right now. And it's kind of stressing me out. I'm stressed about work. That's our conscious mind, the things that we can consciously speak to. And the 90% that's beneath the surface, under the water, the rest of that iceberg, is our subconscious mind, which is expressed via the body and the nervous system. Anything that has happened to you in your past, especially challenging or emotionally charged or traumatic experiences, kind of get recorded by your body and by your nervous system so that you can avoid that particular type of pain again in the future. Your brain and body have a really wonderful way of avoiding pain, minimizing pain as much as possible. And the way they do that is by saying, "Oop, that didn't feel good when that thing happened." Like, I raised my hand and spoke out in class, and all the rest of the kids laughed at me because what I said was really embarrassing, and then nobody wanted to be my friend anymore, and that really hurt. So I'm not going to raise my hand anymore. I'm not going to speak out anymore. And when you find yourself later on going to speak in social settings, you feel like a lump in your throat, like tightness in your chest, and your body starts to physically react because your body remembers that hurt to be so embarrassed and to be rejected by all my peers. Same thing is true by those moments where you feel not seen, not loved, not supported, not nurtured in the ways that you needed to be by parents. And so those stories, those imprints live on the somatic level. We could talk about them all day long. Not much will change. And that's why I think people tend to kind of plateau or get a little frustrated with talk therapy, because they expect it to fix all their problems. And then they find out, like, I feel like I'm just venting week after week and year after year talking about the same thing and nothing's changing. It's because we haven't actually cleared that trauma on a physical level and learned to teach our body a new way of being. So that's really what the realm of somatic work is first just learning to feel again. Most people are so disconnected from their bodies and from physical sensation and from emotion because maybe you were taught growing up that crying was weak, that you had to tough it up, suck it up, and like, don't cry. Maybe you were taught that you weren't allowed to have certain emotions, or that certain emotions were scary. Like if you had a parent who would get really angry and yell, and maybe they'd get aggressive or violent, that's going to feel like an emotion that's not safe to express. So maybe I repress my anger because of that. Or girls often get the message that it's, not ladylike to throw a tantrum, or like it's not okay to scream. And when you're a little kid, you're having a big emotion, you don't understand what's going on. You just want to get it out of you, because that's what emotions do. They're meant to flow through your body. We learn to suppress them. We learn to numb and disconnect from them, because when we don't have the support and tools to be with them, they feel too overwhelming to our system. So the first kind of line of defense in somatic work is just learning to get back into your body and feel what's going on there, to wake up some of that numbness, some of those areas of disconnect, to learn what the numbness or dissociation has been protecting you from, and slowly start to feel it again so that you can move it through you and heal it and release it.
And I know so many people that have been doing therapy for decades, many years. And it's all the work that you're doing here, right? Like revisiting the traumatic events in my childhood and my teenage years, the rejection, the abandonment. But then you keep repeating the cycle and the pattern because it's still stored, recorded in your body. So somatic work, I'm a huge fan. I feel like I'm getting started. I'm from Mexico. I don't feel like we do have that, like knowledge or even the resources to access these kind of tools, but it's so groundbreaking, so important, and it's so needed.
I think, speaking to that momentarily, I actually think that more like ancient and indigenous cultures have these practices sort of naturally embedded in, and maybe there's not the same language around it, but I feel like the realm of somatics is actually just starting to really wake up in the West. You see it more of like a buzzword now on social media, and people are talking about the nervous system more and the body more, and it's so wonderfully important. But if you look back to like, cultures that have always revered the body, whether it's through practices of yoga or in traditional Chinese medicine, like the body is everything. Feeling into what's going on in your body in Chinese medicine, like what's the quality? Is it damp? Is it dry? Is it hot? All these different things. And how can we move through like really subtle movement patterns? Like Qigong is a wonderful somatic practice. And they're so just like naturally part of culture that I think I don't know, it's not as much of like a discussion here where we have to actively implement and say, no, you need to get in your body. You need to learn to feed, you need to learn to move and breathe and to not live in your head all the time. I think many cultures, but definitely ours, prioritizes intellect over everything else. Like it's the mind, it's the brain power, it's the willpower and motivation. And that's like number one. That's 10% of the equation. That's it.
I'm so grateful you mentioned this part, because I do feel like from my Mexican roots, dancing has always been a crucial part. Like me growing up, I remember dancing all the time. It was like, like we like to party, and there was always a reason why to dance. There's wisdom in those practices. And now these conversations taking me back to asking you, what is ancestral healing? So we're talking right now about trauma is stored in your body. Is it possible that trauma then passes on to the next generations? For those that have never, let me tell you that I had a conversation with a Chinese girl the other day, and I was telling her about generational trauma, and she was like, I've never heard such a thing. What does that even mean? And I was shocked, because I thought like we all have had this conversation, right? Like, how are you dealing with the things that were done to your ancestors, to people that came before you? But apparently there are people out there that have never heard of such a term. How can you introduce us to this topic, Megan?
Yeah, I think that especially in the realm of pop psychology and pop culture, again, like somatic work, the idea of generational trauma or ancestral trauma is like making its way sort of into or back into the zeitgeist. And so people are just starting to become familiar with that concept. And I get that for some, it might seem sort of weird or woo-woo, like how could somebody else's trauma from 5 generations back be passed down to me? That seems silly. But they've actually done a lot of really incredible studies. I'm sure there's studies all around the world, but the ones that I'm most familiar with are the studies of descendants of Holocaust survivors. And they've also done studies of other kind of lineage patterns and descendants of people who have been through extremely traumatic events like war and genocide. And they look for certain markers in the DNA and patterns of inflammation and tendencies towards particular disease that wouldn't have been present otherwise. And they've actually found, I can't speak extremely knowledgeably to this because it's not my area of expertise, but I do find it fascinating. They have found really strong correlations between, generations back, somebody who experiences an extreme trauma, going through poverty or famine or genocide or war, and then 3, 4, 5 generations down, their grandchildren have those same markers in their DNA, almost like as if their body went through that same trauma. And so if you're not into like the woo-woo side of things, like there are scientific studies that you can point to, but I think for anybody who has any sort of spiritual beliefs whatsoever, if you get quiet for long enough and really connect with your body and start to connect with the energy of all the people it took for you to be here, your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, and really thinking about everything that they went through, and not just like what they went through on a physical level, but the emotional patterns that they passed down. You can see like, oh yeah, my dad's always angry because his dad was always angry and yelled at him, and his dad always used to beat him. And so like maybe it's gotten slightly better over the years, but there's that pattern of anger that was passed down. You can see and identify and feel into those patterns that get passed down, the memory of traumas that get passed down both through storytelling, because the members of the family pass along the stories, and also through kind of embodied lived experience. And I think it's important to also acknowledge, while we're on this topic, that the same is true for generational wisdom and generational gifts. Like trauma for sure gets passed down in families, but so does wisdom. And so do a lot of really wonderful things. And I think it's when you get to that point, if you're exploring this work for yourself and breaking cycles and healing patterns of generational trauma, it's so beautifully healing to also acknowledge like what gifts have gotten passed down to me in this lineage, what strength and resilience has gotten passed down to me as a result of everything that they've lived through and been through. And the last thing I'll say about this is, again, I'm not an expert in this particular area, but I can speak to my own personal experience of diving into the depths of that work for myself. And I've kind of particularly done a lot of healing work around my maternal lineage. So my mom's side and all the women in that line. And when I got really committed to doing that healing work for myself, didn't tell my mom about it. She's still living, and we have a good relationship at this point. It's been challenged over the years, but it's not something I spoke to her about at all. And it's something I was just really doing for myself. And I started to notice this ripple effect. The more I did this work for myself, the more I saw it start to show up in my family, in my mom, in the way that she was showing up for her own inner healing that she had never done before, and how it changed the dynamic of our relationship without me even having to do anything differently. So when you do this work, it really does have a ripple effect, not only in like, if you choose to have children of your own, you're passing down new patterns, but you really are creating this generational healing. It's not just for you. It's felt, even if they don't realize it, it's felt on this subtle level by all the people who've come before you.
And that speaks about the power we have,
Mm-hmm.
and how, and the impact, because so many people, and I do feel like nowadays younger people might feel like they don't have as much to say. There's no much power, influence, authority that they have access to, but that's a lie. Technically, every choice you're making has an impact, and is changing, is having an effect on your family, on your environment, the people around you. And for those, I'm also fascinated by this topic. Anyone who thinks like, no, I don't really feel like we can pass trauma, to the next generation, I will invite you to take a look into your family history and
Mm-hmm.
see what patterns, what kind of things are constantly repeating. My
Mm-hmm.
family is a very good example of certain patterns that have repeated for generations. I'm not telling you about my mom and my grandma. I'm telling you about like my great 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 grandma, and then the children of my brother, and like things that I'm shocked at seeing how come we keep doing the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And it's impressive how much people were just taking it for granted, like, well, that's life, all the men
Mm-hmm.
in my family will be cheated, all the women in my family will end up in divorce. Like, it was a thing that happened for, I don't know, 6 generations, and no one ever wondered, what are we doing? Why is it this our reality?
Yeah, because when it just feels normal, you're sort of like a fish in water. You don't realize you're in water until you get out of it. And it's hard to see a pattern when it is perpetuated by so many people before you, and that's all that you know. And so it's kind of encouraged. And to be the one who is the cycle breaker, to be the one who takes that step back and says, wait a minute, why does this keep happening? And do I want this for my life? Hey, you guys, why are we doing this? That actually requires a tremendous amount of bravery and courage, because being different in your family on a sort of biological nervous system level actually feels quite threatening, because we sense that if I'm different, I'll be cast out, I'll be rejected, I won't have their support or their love. And if we're looking back many generations ancestrally, that would be a threat to our survival. We couldn't have made it without the tribe, we couldn't have made it on our own. And so perpetuating the patterns was sort of like a lifeline. Like, all right, well, that's how I'm going to stay a part of the tribe, a part of the group. And I think now we're at this massive turning point in history where we do have a lot more freedom and independence and the ability to say, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do things differently, even if that means taking the risk of no longer being accepted and embraced by my family, which is a scary thing for a lot of people.
That is so so true. So something else that I heard you speaking about before was attachment styles.
Mm,
And this is a kind of like a different question, a different topic, but I'm really interested in hearing your opinion about what is an attachment style and
mm.
how does that influence, or what's the impact of an attachment style into our relationships.
Yeah, I mean, it's all so interconnected, anyways. There's so much overlap here. Like I said, I really identified that so many of our core wounds and like kind of big problems in our life can be traced back to attachment wounds. Just as a couple examples before I get into like what are the attachment styles. Um, when I was a teenager and into my early 20s, I struggled with an eating disorder. And kind of on the surface, you would think that somebody with an eating disorder or like body image issues, that it's just about your body and what you look like. But for many people, it actually comes down to this like theme of control and needing to be in control, because maybe there's places you felt out of control and feeling unworthy and not good enough and not lovable. And so finding this tool that helps you feel good enough or strive to feel good enough, because you never really do when you're in the disorder. But um, any number of things like addiction, somebody who struggles with addiction, at the core, it's probably a wound around attachment, around the heart, something that can be traced back to early life. And so what attachment theory is essentially the understanding that the bonds that we form with our parents or caregivers in the early years of our life impact or influence the way that we choose people and relate to people in partnerships as an adult. And so there's kind of 4 primary attachment styles that have been identified. And I'm also, I will say, a big advocate for taking any sort of like methodology or language, both with a grain of salt, applying it to yourself and feeling into like what feels true for me, and not using these conversations as like a way to diagnose yourself. There's a lot of people who will say like, oh, I'm anxiously attached. And so I just need to like manage that anxiety because I am anxiously attached, rather than saying, oh, I have tendencies to show up this way in relationships. I wonder why that is. I wonder what that core wound is. So we can talk more about that. But the sort of baseline attachment style that I would say is the ideal one that we want to strive for is called secure attachment. And that's where in relationships, you feel like you're able to both be vulnerable and intimate with somebody emotionally, physically, in a healthy way, and also have a healthy sense of independence, healthy sense of self. So like, I'm not depending on you for validation, but I am opening myself up to be vulnerable and letting you see me and love me. I can easily have disagreements in a relationship and communicate about it in healthy ways without fearing that you're going to leave me or the relationship's going to go somewhere. Like, I'm confident in the relationship and trusting of the relationship, but I also trust myself enough to know that if we broke up and something happened that was devastating, that I would be okay because I trust in my ability to show up for myself. So secure attachment happens when most of your primary needs as a child or as an infant are met. So your parents and caregivers are, for the most part, like at least 80% of the time, attuned to how you feel and what you need, and they're showing up for your needs. The insecure attachment styles, there's 3 of them. There's the anxious attachment style, which gets talked about a lot as being like the really needy, sort of clingy, like when I don't hear from you, I get really scared and I'm worried about how you feel about me. Do you like me? Are you going to leave me? I'm afraid of abandonment. I'm afraid of rejection. And so I need lots of validation. I crave you telling me how you feel and showing me all the time. And if I don't get that, then I feel like there's something wrong with me. Avoidant attachment, a lot of people think is sort of the opposite, but it's really not. Avoidant attachment comes from the same place. I'm afraid of abandonment. I'm afraid of rejection. And so instead of trying to get you to tell me how you feel about me, instead, my tactic or my defense mechanism is to put a guard up around my heart and to say, it actually doesn't matter to me. I'm fine on my own. I don't need you to love me. I'm good over here. So we sort of guard ourselves against the potential pain of getting left or of getting rejected. The last of the attachment styles is a little bit more rare. It's called disorganized attachment. And it's basically where you oscillate between those anxious and avoidant behaviors. So it's like, I really crave love. Like, I want connection, come close to me. But then as soon as I feel you getting too close, I push you away or I self-sabotage because I'm scared of getting hurt. So I like kind of go back and forth between the two. And that one is often present when there was a lot of instability or chaos in your household growing up. Like if you didn't know, what you were coming home to. Maybe you had a parent who struggled with addiction. And so you didn't know, are they going to be sober? Are they going to be drunk? Are they going to be in a good mood? Or are they going to be in a bad mood and yelling at me? And then there's that sort of unpredictability that can lead to that disorganized behavior. So again, the key is to like see what patterns can I identify within myself and then trace them back to core wounds rather than saying, I'm anxiously attached. That's just the way I am.
So what I hear you saying is, this is so beautiful and it's so rich and very valuable. What I hear you saying is, this is a tool for you to develop self-awareness, and yeah, we're talking about the journey of healing, but it's not build your identity upon this label. Is yeah, and I think that's a really important note that needed to be made when we're having these kind of conversations. A lot of people that I know are using exactly these terms to simply not moving anywhere, but kind of like, oh, well, now I'm this and I am that. And I'm still the same person. I'm not moving anywhere, but call me this, call me that. So,
Right.
yeah.
And there's so much more nuance to it. This is also why I think there's starting to be more feedback or disagreement around the idea of love languages, for example, because people were saying like, oh, my love language is physical touch or my love language is gifts. And so I need you to do this for me. The reality is we all give and receive and express love in different ways. And we all have like a multitude of love languages. And when you try to narrow it down to like, this is my one love language, you're really limiting your expression of love in the ways that you can both give it and receive it. And so we have to be attuned to the nuance. Like when it comes to attachment, when it comes to expressing and receiving love, getting clear on what is true for me, what's the story that I've been living in, and how is that maybe not aligned with the truth that I would like to be living when it comes to love and connection and relationships. And again, a lot of it is going to come back to really challenging our limiting core beliefs, like examining what's in our subconscious, examining what our body and nervous system has been holding on to, and those attachment wounds from the past, and being able to feel that, to really move through it, rather than just saying like, oh, this is me and let me learn to manage it.
Exactly. Why do you think that it's hard for people to embrace solitude and being with myself and enjoying the time? Like when we're talking about relationships, it's commonly that people who will come and listen to this conversation is like, where is my man? How do I heal what I need to heal so that I can find my man and I can get married and be happy forever after? And that's not as real as I wish it could be. I don't actually wish it could be, because I do feel like there's part of a conversation that's missing is how beautiful, how rich, how profound that relationship with yourself can be, and that you don't need, to outsource that love, to outsource that self-care. But why is it difficult for it? And I you have been explaining this for quite a few minutes, but give me your advice or your thoughts in this regard.
Yeah. And by the way, I totally relate to that. I think that was at the beginning and maybe way into the middle as well of my own exploration and healing. I was wanting to do this work from that perspective of like, if I heal enough, then my person will magically show up and then I'll be worthy and lovable. Like, how can I fix myself so that I can get love? And it was that sort of like binary equation. Like, I'm doing this to get this outcome. And I think that's really common for a lot of us because we pedestalize romantic love. We make it the most important thing. And there's this sense that without it, somehow you're like a little bit less than. Like we celebrate in so many cultures, we celebrate engagements and marriages and babies and like lots of relationship oriented things. And we don't do a lot of celebrating single people on their own, creating their lives and accomplishing things that are incredibly worthy in terms of self-exploration and identity. So I think there's this sort of unspoken feeling that like, oh, I have to follow that path and do those things to be accepted and loved and celebrated by my family, my culture, society, etc. And then again, like combine that with those wounds of wanting to be chosen that we talked about earlier, this drive for like, let me find a partner to fulfill all those things feels so important. And I can speak to my journey in particular, as well as a lot of the women that I've worked with. I didn't even know it was an option to just like be intentionally single and prioritize a relationship with myself. I didn't have any concept of like relationship with self and what that meant. I only had the concept of relationships with other people. That's, I think, what we all have a concept of. And the idea of having a relationship with me wasn't something that even occurred to me until I had gotten far enough along in the healing process to realize like, oh, I'm this whole person that I haven't taken the time to get to know. I've based my identity and who I am on the people I surround myself with, the guys that I'm dating or the friends that I have. I base my way I show up on how they're showing up. What foods do they like? What are their favorite music artists? Like, what do they like to do? I'll do that. I'll fit myself into those boxes. And I hadn't taken the time to get to know who I was independent of anyone else. And I think a lot of people, that can be the case. And that's where I really started to come into this concept of like, oh, when you're dating someone and getting to know someone new, you're asking them questions, you're getting curious about their life, you're doing fun activities together and like getting to know each other in the context of all these different settings. The same thing can be true with yourself. So I could take myself out on a date. I could take myself out on an adventure. I can journal. I can ask myself questions and get to know who I am, how I think, what I want, what I like when someone else isn't informing those decisions for me. Especially, again, for somebody who's maybe been a little bit more codependent or relied on your sense of self from somebody else or from the people around you. So I think the first answer to your question is like, we don't realize it's an option to like be in solitude. The second answer is that there can be resistance around being alone because we think we're giving up on this dream of partnership. Like, if I like my own company, then that means I might miss out on meeting the right person, meeting my soulmate. And I think we think of it as like a binary equation, like either this or that. And it's really like a both and. I'm still a huge romantic. I love love. And anybody who wants a beautiful, healthy, long-term, lifelong relationship, marriage, whatever it is that you want, I believe that you can have that. And I love celebrating love stories for people, especially when both people are actively working on themselves and working for it to be a healthy relationship. I think that that's such a beautiful thing. And even then, you still want to have a relationship with yourself. You still want to be taking yourself out on solo dates and doing things separate from your partner to continue to get to know who you are and see how you want to grow and evolve, and then bring those conversations into the relationship. So it's not something that just happens while you're single and then ends once you have a partner. It's something that you commit to for the rest of your life. I'm going to choose to get to know me, my soul, my body, like this individual right here. I'm going to continue to build a relationship with her for the rest of my life here. And that's such a beautiful commitment to make to yourself. And I think maybe the last fear in it is just the unknown. Like, what if I don't like who I am? What if I don't like what I discover? And there's a lot more I could say about that as well. But those are probably the three reasons I think most people have resistance around solitude.
Yeah. And as you were speaking, something that came from me was there's so much shame around. Now I can speak about women because I work
Yeah.
with women, but shame about around women not getting married,
Yeah.
shame around women not having children. And so that's hard. And speaking about family and like, these expectations, like and cultural expectations. But I do feel like when you come from a place of empowerment and you are grounded and you know yourself well enough to know that you're worthy of love and of everything beautiful and magical in this world, with or without a relationship, then these kind of comments won't really hurt as deep as they will hurt before, when you're still struggling with not feeling worthy of love because no one's choosing you. Then that hurts a lot more than when you do the work and you're kind of like, I'm okay, I'm gonna go
Yeah.
out with myself.
Yeah, that coming into yourself. And I think like that happens with self-discovery. Part of it, I think, happens a little bit with age as well. Like we need more time to rest within ourselves to feel that confidence. And it is really interesting how that happens. I remember I always say, like, I never felt more behind in life than when I was 25. When I was 25 and I hadn't met the one yet, and I thought I'd be married by now and starting to have kids and checking all these boxes. And I felt so far off from doing any of that. And I thought there was like something deeply wrong with me. And then I remember being 26 and kind of casually dating this guy that I wasn't really interested in. It wasn't going to go anywhere. But on one of our dates, I remember him saying that I should take it more seriously. And like, I think he was a little bit offended that I didn't have feelings for him. And so he was like, why wouldn't you just like want this to go somewhere? Because you're 26, like you're old. No one's going to want to like be with you or have kids with you after like another year or two. And I, at the time, remember feeling like, oh my God, is that true? Have I like missed my opportunity? And I was so scared and would get comments like that, like, oh, when you're approaching 30, you're over the hill, which is such a harmful narrative for women. It's so untrue. And I started to feel more and more free after I turned 30. I'm 33 now. And my relationship with myself has just deepened year by year by year. And if people make comments now, whether it's on social media or, somebody in real life saying like, oh, you don't have much time left if you want to start a family, really doesn't faze me at all anymore, because I know who I am. I know and trust in myself, but more importantly, I trust in the timing of my life. And I have such a deep knowing that what is meant for me will never miss me. And that's something that I wish upon all women, to get to that place where you can deeply trust the timing of your life and to know that the things that are meant for you, the growth, the relationship, if you want to have a family, if you don't, like all of the things that are meant and aligned for you, they will happen, especially if you continue to make choices that are in integrity with your truth, not choices for other people and all the people around you. But if you're making choices for you, it's a lot easier to trust the timing of your life.
Oh my, thank you. Thank you for these words of advice. I do feel like this is going to help a lot to this very specific audience. Before I let you go, I want to ask you one more thing that is just coming to my mind right now. Part of this conversation that we're having right now about finding the right person, I have had a few conversations in the last few days where women who are really doing the work, they're like really, really doing, they're like healing their divine feminine and divine masculine, and they're like really integrating their experiences. And I want to say that they are a little bit more aware of themselves, more empowered, more healed, I want to say. They are struggling with finding a partner who is available at the same level. And there is, in the circle of women that I work with, there's this conversation going on of like, am I ever going to find a man that is, available the same way that I am? What do you have to say in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, when I talk about like reasons why somebody is single when they don't want to be, it's like, I've been doing a lot of work, I want a relationship, and why hasn't it come yet? I've really identified that there's usually three primary reasons. It's either our clarity, our patterns, or our timing. Clarity meaning we haven't yet gotten fully clear on the type of partner or partnership that we want to have and participate in, whether that's on our side of things or the type of partner we want to be with. And maybe we haven't gotten clear that that actually exists. So for those women who are like, I've done all this work on myself, what if there's no men out there who can meet me at this level? They might not have a lot of great examples, like tangible examples that they can point to and say, oh, yes, a relationship like that, a man like that. And that kind of clarity can be really helpful to go out and actively seek examples of couples, of partnerships, of men, of people that represent what you're looking for, so that you have that clarity of like, okay, it exists. And I've affirmed that like, these are the things that are most important to me. I'm clear on my negotiables and deal breakers. And I'm clear that this is my standard and I'm not going to accept any less. If I want to like pursue a period of casually dating and just having fun, sure, maybe my standards are a little different, but for a life partner, this is my standard. And in the meantime, I'm going to continue to cultivate a life I love so much that I'm clear enough to be able to wait. The second one, patterns. So that speaks to what we were talking about earlier. Like maybe I haven't actually gone into the subconscious or into the body to identify old attachment wounds and patterns that I'm still perpetuating. Maybe consciously, I really want love. But somewhere unconsciously, maybe I'm afraid of it. Maybe I'm afraid of being emotionally available and vulnerable in the way that I would need to be to have that deep, life-changing, rich, passionate partnership that I want. That requires an incredible amount of intimacy, vulnerability, bravery, courage to have that sort of deep love. So maybe some part of me unconsciously is still a little bit afraid of it and keeping it at bay. So I've got to get clear on that. If I've done all that, the clarity, and work through the patterns, and it's still not here, that third category is timing. How much can I be willing to surrender, to trust the timing of my life, to know that it's happening exactly as it's meant to for me, and to do this sort of like free fall, this trust fall of I'm going to keep moving forward in my life in the ways I feel intuitively guided and called. And I'm going to trust that if I desire a partnership and I meet that person today, tomorrow, a year from now, 10 years from now, I might not want to wait that long, but I'm going to trust in the timing of my life, that it's all happening as it's meant to.
And I had a conversation with a friend the other day, and we were talking about astrology, which is another topic that fascinates me. And she was telling me how difficult it is for her to date, to find a partner. And what came to me was like, that's something that we speak in our astrology circles is that certain areas of your life get activated at specific times throughout your life, throughout the year, seasonally, right? And so I wonder if you knew that your partner's gonna walk through that door next month, what will you do with your life in this upcoming month? Will you enjoy it like to, the maximum you can? Will you be like the happiest single girl out there? Totally. And so I do believe that what you're saying is kind of like aligned to that conversation: trusting, surrender. The time is right for every person. Megan, is there any last piece of advice that you would like to share with the audience today?
I would say that, everything we've talked about so far sometimes is easier said than done, right? Like, it's easy for me to say, trust your timing, do this deep inner work. It's easy for me to say a lot of that because I've done it. And I mean, it is a process. I'm continuing to do that work. But when you're making that choice to really free fall and dive deep and surrender and do the work for the first time, it's a lot. It can be big and scary, and you're learning to trust yourself one step at a time. So give yourself as much grace and compassion and patience as you can on this journey, wherever you're at. If you're healing ancestral wounds and ancestral trauma, or if you're creating space for healthy partnership and love, have grace. And for anybody who's listening who is in that place of, I really want a partnership and I'm doing all this work to heal my attachment trauma and love myself and create space for healthy love, when's my partner going to show up? The last thing I'll say is just to treat this like the last chapter of your life where you will ever be single, and have this time to really intentionally be selfish. Cultivate this relationship with you, travel to the places you want to travel to, do the things that you want to do, and really soak up and like get as much juice out of this chapter of your life as you can, because there will be a day where you look back on it and you'll realize, like, wow, I was never again going to be 30 or 33 and single, and like having that opportunity to just focus on me, and what a gift that was. So embrace the gift while you have it.
Beautiful, beautiful. And what a gift to have this conversation with you. Megan, you are a well of wisdom, and it's been an incredible journey talking with you about all of these topics that are so important. And I want to thank you for taking the time to share with us your insights. Before we close and wrap up this episode, where can people find you? How can they access your work?
Absolutely. I'm on all the social platforms. So I'm on Instagram at Megan Sherer. If you are on TikTok, I'm over there at Heal with Megs. You can find all the links to my social media and podcast and YouTube and all the things on my Instagram. It's probably the best place. I post the most frequent updates there, or getting on my mailing list. That's where you can find out about programs that I have launching. I run a group program a couple times a year. I usually do 1 or 2 retreats every year. I've got one coming up this summer in Ireland for any ladies who are interested. It's going to be pretty special. And all of that can be found on my website, which is megansherer.com.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Megan, for your time, your wisdom. And to all our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Remember that the journey to healing and connection starts with a single step. We are not alone on this path. Join us next time as we continue to explore the depths of our minds and hearts. Until then, take care of yourselves and of each other. I am thrilled to have you in my circle, and I am buzzing with excitement to conjure up some magic together. Remember, in Goddess Unleashed, we don't just talk the talk, we walk the mystical walk. Tune in and transform with me. Until next time, keep your spirits high and your magic untamed.